Welcome to AWS She Builds Tech Skills with your hosts, Mai and May.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to AWS She Builds Tech Skills. My name is May, and I am a solutions architect and host from AWS. Today, we have got a special host, Jyoti. Jyoti, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey May, I'm Jyoti, a solution architect at AWS, and I have a keen interest in observability, which happens to be the theme for this season. And I'm so excited to be co-hosting with May and Mai this time. So
Thank
May,
you.
so May, I know you are at a symposium. Tell us where you are at. You have a very interesting background.
I know. I am live streaming from the symposium. So I'm based out of Sydney in Australia. And this week we have South by Southwest. If you're in the media industry, if you're a content creator, if you're interested in the content creation, artists, or innovation in general, we have a South by Southwest in ICC in Sydney. And yesterday we also have a media symposium. So this has been a busy, hectic week. And today we are doing a live streaming. So hello from ICC in Sydney. What about you, Jyoti? What's happening on the other side of New Zealand?
Well, I think there's a lot of talk about reInvent. So I think if you're going to reInvent, let us know in the chat if you're going to reInvent. If you've been to reInvent before, which year have you been in? I'm really curious to know. And if there's anything in particular that you're looking forward to at reInvent, that would also be key, because I think the content for reInvent was out and much earlier than usual. So if you do, let us know. Yeah, I think it's mostly reInvent that's possibly happening.
It's a lot of buzz around reInvent that is happening. So anyone watching on the live stream, I can see Aaron's. I'm just saying hi to Aaron's. If anyone watching on the live stream going to reInvent, or if you've never heard of reInvent, let us know and go and check out the reInvent session catalog. There are a lot of exciting sessions happening at reInvent. I just put a link in the chat if you want to go and check it out. All right, so we have been talking about observability for She Builds Tech Skills. Like this has been the theme for this season. So Jyoti, tell us a little bit about your journey with observability on AWS. What have you been working on from the observability standpoint?
Yeah, so I think the key one, I think, is the app signals, which Pratima, our guest, will be speaking about. But apart from being really excited about it and seeing a lot of customers being excited by what has been built with the opinionated flow of the dashboards, I did recently work on a blog which added support for Bedrock to improve generative AI application observability via the same interface in application signals. So that was a very interesting journey for me, because I got more familiar with how application signals works. And I got to work closely with the internal teams as well to get that blog out, because it was a launch blog post. Apart from that, there's plenty of new features in beta today. I'm not going to say what, but if you do use CloudWatch today, please do reach out to your account teams and let them know that you're keen to know what betas are available, and you can get early access to them and then give feedback. So it's a pretty cool thing that we do at AWS, where we get early access and get feedback, because we build for our customers. So if you're interested, if you're using CloudWatch, reach out to your account teams. And if you don't know who your account team is, give us a DM here and we'll figure that out for you as well. So yeah, that's the part that I've been working on from observability.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. Observability being a big topic with my customers, and it has changed a lot. Back in my days as a software engineer, I usually look after the application observability. So just making sure the health of the applications, the infrastructure side, I never really looked at the infrastructure observability or container observability, especially in the area of app signals and CloudWatch and that kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to today's session. So Jyoti, I hand over to you to introduce our guest speakers and the topic for today.
Yes, awesome. So today we have Pratima. Pratima is a senior solution architect at AWS who specializes in security. And so let's get her on and ask her why security and observability and how she got into observability. I'm really curious. But she is a very tenured Amazonian and is very highly regarded. So I'm really curious to know how she manages her life being a mom of two young children and being so amazing at her job and what she does, not only with our customers, but also within the security and now observability space.
Awesome. All right. So let's invite Pratima. Hello,
Hello.
hello.
Thanks for the intro, Jyoti. Thank you so much for having me on today as well. To answer your first question, I think security has just been this thing that I've always done with the kind of customers that I worked with, even before I joined AWS. When we moved to Australia, it was, wagering or banking, like the two biggest industries, and both of them very regulated. So it just became muscle memory on operating in the cloud and just building secure solutions in the cloud. And then when I did join AWS, I was privileged enough to be in May's team, and she and I ended up building a security focused program as well for businesses that start using the cloud. How do they know more about how to build secure solutions or simple tips and tricks of MFA enablement and why you should not have users and you should use IAM roles and things like that. So it kept on, and I got an opportunity to move to a security specialist role within AWS as well, which brought me closer to, like yourself, Jyoti, to the service teams. So as a customer, I was always in awe of like cloud engineering, like how do people build these services that scale at such a rate? And getting closer to the service teams was one of the things that really helped me get a bit of visibility and insight. Um, and I always feel like the primary part of everything is visibility. So unless you have visibility in what's happening in your environment, you have no idea what to do next, right? Feeds into security, feeds into how you would build better experiences for your end customers. So observability becomes this thread that ties everything together. Um, Observability is a relatively newer term. We used to, back in the day, we would say, oh, logging and monitoring. And, then it broke out into multiple pieces, and then application monitoring, and then SRE became a term, and SLOs, SLIs, so many things started to happen. But at the end of it, it's what good looks like in your environment, and what is good for your customer. And then all of the bits around how secure our environment is, what feeds into that, all of that becomes the telemetry that you capture. So
Yep.
just it just crosses paths everywhere. So I think there is a
Yeah.
natural relationship of observability with security, and I'm super keen to learn more about observability, which is why I'm trying to build more depth in this area as well.
So
I
now
I
every
haven't seen, yeah.
no, you
I
go,
was
May.
gonna say I haven't seen the security and observability tied together. So this is a really interesting that Pratima, you come from security background. Jyoti, you have a lot of observability experience. So like, how do we tie it together for the customer? But before we go into that, we do have a question from the audience, and I think Pratima or Jyoti, you might be the best place to answer these questions. Is there a foundation level certificate for security? I'm assuming, given if it is a AWS hosted show, so I'm going to assume that this is the AWS certification. um, I
Yeah.
believe, Fatima, you have a security certificate from AWS.
Yeah,
So
so I did have it. It expired in August. I need to sit for it again. They only last you 3 years, but I think a natural way to move, if you don't have any cloud understanding, natural progression would be to do your cloud practitioner, and then look at, say, one of the associate ones. So I feel like the solutions architect associate certification is more an overall rounded, information around how to build solutions in the cloud, and the questions or the scenarios are very sort of well architected framework aligned, and then think of the security specialty. Because if you jump into the security specialty without understanding, cloud, it may not, like, you might pass it, but what would you learn? That's the question.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
choose your path. If you're already working in a domain that you understand security well enough, you understand cloud environments well enough, go for the security specialty. But if you don't, then try one of the associates first and then do the specialty ones.
yeah. I think that's a great advice. Associate would give, in my opinion, a understanding like foundations of all of these services and what
Mm.
is the use cases and how to use those services. Level 200, level 300 level, and then and go into specialty, and then security specialty would be a way to go. Great
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
I see Jyoti put a link in the chat as well. So if
Yes.
anyone's interested in the cloud practitioner, that would be the first step in getting into a certifications on AWS.
Yes, absolutely. Give
And
you that foundation.
Aaron also put it on there. Sorry, Jyoti, I cut you off a lot, so please go
That's
ahead.
perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Yeah, so Aaron's going security is top priority at AWS, and all certifications actions have a domain that's focused on security. So you can study for an exam that aligns to your current or future role. Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
that's the best advice. So I think we dived straight into tech, just in typical Pratima style, right? So Pratima, before we go into we actually go into the demo, yeah, I'm still curious to know how you got into tech and how you manage your work-life balance between, the work that you do before customers as a security specialist, as well as being an amazing mom of two kids. So really curious to know.
Um, uh, I got it. Well, I'm actually an electronics and telecom graduate, so I didn't do computer sciences or information technology or anything. It's whatever I've learned, it feels like I've learned mostly on the job. The good part of my education was that I did a lot of, because it was electronics, I did a lot of chipset programming. So at the time, controllers, ARM processors that today, power Graviton and stuff. So as a part of our curriculum, we had to program them. So I kind of understood, machine assembly language and stuff. Um, and when I graduated from university, I kind of moved into infrastructure management. So it became a lot of like configuration management, databases, CMDBs, automating deployments. So not coding. So I'm not a programmer. I cannot build like, large websites and fancy stuff. I can definitely build cloud infrastructure. So at the time, DevOps was this big thing or this big movement that had started to bridge the gap between developers and operations. So I was fortunate enough to work at an organization that helped me build that skill, and automation was a big part of that entire DevOps movement that we had. So I built my expertise in technologies like Chef, Puppet, and Ansible, and really making sure that I don't have to SSH into a server and download security updates. So it does everything on its own. And cloud was like the next level on top of it, like ages ahead of what we were doing by hand, by scripts. And AWS was the first cloud I got introduced to, and I got completely hooked on as a customer. So I continued to learn more. I mean, it was so funny what VPCs or what technology we had used within AWS in one business. 3 years later, when I moved to a different industry, it had changed so drastically because customers were using it so much at scale. So it's this drive to continue learning that kind of fuels me to move forward, right? We're always learning and we're always curious what's going to happen next. So lots of things came in the last 10, 12 years, right? We had this whole thing about game tech, we've got blockchain, now generative AI, and
Yes.
who knows what in the future. So that's something that keeps me going. Um, Work-life balance is interesting. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's a bit of a push, especially school holidays. Because my kids are quite young. They're 9 and 6, so they kind of know when they can push their boundaries because I'm busy.
I
um,
hear that from a lot of moms. I hear that from a lot of moms.
I know, right? But I live out in the Central Coast, so we do get some time away from the hustle bustle of the city, and we're able to go to a beach like in 5 minutes. So even if it's like 20 minutes, we just take some time, go out for a walk, come back, settle back into our things, our devices, and then move forward from there. Um, it's one day at a time. Everyone asks me this. It's just one day at a time, and then we see how it goes. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting journey. I feel at AWS I get this opportunity to include my kids into a lot of things as well. So we do this. I think there's a tech day for girls that the data center teams organize. So I've taken my daughter to it last year. Gonna take her again this year. So she likes it. She likes to see what I'm doing at my job. My son's 6. He's still busy with his toys, but my daughter's very interested. So there's probably one time I'll bring her to the office as well, and she's super keen to know, like, are there any more girls in your, she wants to know what girls do as jobs when they grow up, outside of what the general things she sees
At
at TV.
home.
So
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. And on that note, I think I will put in the chat that we do have about 25 roles open in our org
Mhm.
across ANZ. So if you are keen, please do apply. It is, as Pratima says, there's heaps of opportunities, heaps of learning. So yeah, there is. I will put that in the link right now. But with that, May, do you think we're ready to get into the presentation? Or do you have any more questions for?
Yeah, I think I'm just chatting away in the chat on there are a lot of comment somehow related to the topic, but it's also a I'm just gonna read out the handle. So apologies if I read it incorrectly. It's talking about DMJ boys, talking about storing images and videos, like how is the best way to do on in the cloud. So I'm just talking through S3 and storing the images, those images, video in S3 served or delivered via the CDN via the cloud front. And I'm just trying to find the blog post and multitasking at the same time. So a lot of chats going on. If you have any questions regarding observability and the topic that we're going to do, feel free to put a comment in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat. Jyoti is also monitoring, but we're going to give a stage to Pratima to talk about the observability on AWS. So Pratima, it is all yours.
Thank you so much, May. So we were talking about kids, right? I've got two. Anyone in the room that has multiple kids, so more than one, let's put it that way. You can put yes or no in the chat. I can see the chat from here. But if you do have children, or if you have had a sibling growing up or cousins around you growing up, you would have faced similar situations. So usually I'm busy cooking in the kitchen or doing my work in my office, and then my kids will go into the room, they'll be laughing and playing, and 30 minutes later there'll be a mad scream. One will come stomping down, the other would be screaming at it, at each other, and then they'll come into my office, and then one of them will say, the other one hit me, and the other one will say, no, I did not, I didn't do anything. Now, I'm sitting in the office, which is a level down from their room. All I can base this on is who screamed the loudest, right? Who screamed first? Because what am I lacking? What do I not have right now with me? All right, this is going to work only if you guys answer my questions, because you expect answers from me. Right. So, what am I missing? Come on. Awfully chatty people, but not answering my question. But yeah, so I'm missing telemetry. I don't know what conspired in the room. I only know what's being told to me, and I do not know whether that is the truth or not. Right. So if you've grown up in the 80s, the easiest way was who started the fight, you let the other one stop it, and you're even and you're done. But that still isn't the truth, right? Because whoever was the loudest is probably going to tip the
Yeah,
scales in their direction.
Yeah.
So what am I missing? Telemetry, right? It's not too different from how we operate in cloud environments. So outside of the blogs that I write with AWS, I also have my own personal blog, and those opinions are my own, and I've put in, there's a couple, since I became a mother, I started seeing similarities between enterprise architecture and the things I do in security with motherhood. So if you get time, go to think-devops.com and maybe get a laugh out of it. But this is one of the scenarios where technology really comes together with nature. So if I had telemetry, right, if I had a camera in my kids' room, but they're not 18 yet, so they're under my roof, so I can reach that privacy if I want. That's just me. So if I had a camera in the room, I would be able to see what happened. Like we have our video doorbells, they give us the videos that show us what happened in our front yard or backyard when we were away or when an alarm kicked off. So if I knew what had happened, I would be fair and I would understand what conspired and how to resolve it, which is nothing short of engineering or monitoring or observability, right? So how can we modernize on observability these days? Now I'm going to shift towards technology. Dr. Werner Vogels very famously said, everything fails all the time. And there is nothing more true, right? No matter what you build. And we talk about this in security as well. Customers ask us, how much security is enough security? I don't think there is an answer to it, right? It's how, what are you aiming for? What is your business goal? What is your strategic goal on your key indicators that will tell you that this is the security posture and this is where we need to take it, or this is our these are the indicators of our customers enjoying their experience on our websites, and this is where we need to take it. How do you give yourselves time to innovate as well? Because while you're innovating, you're also failing and relearning. One of the things that the DevOps mindset has taught us, right? You fail fast and you learn faster. So it all comes together through observability. um, some of the core concepts to think about here, right? We listen to these, we hear about these terms all the time: SLIs, SLOs, SLAs. They only have a letter different, right? But what exactly is different when we talk about these? Whoa, what happened? When we talk about these items. So think about it. Say you have a website that you are that you've basically built, and for example, it's an informational website. What are the what are the few items that you would look for that will tell you that the customer is having the experience that we expect from a good, what good looks like for them? So those are your indicators. It's a quantitative measurement that basically expresses or assesses an aspect of the service. Now, the SLO is the objective aligned with the indicator. So the indicator is an item, say latency. An objective will be what percent of requests should be considered good. And what is good? Say, for example, 99.9% of the requests should be completed under 200 milliseconds. Now, those are mathematical actions you've put. Basically, you've put maths into your indicator. And then you have an SLA. SLA is essentially an agreement. And an agreement defines, sometimes it can be legally binding as well. An agreement defines that if you do not uphold your SLO, what are the consequences to it? So for example, um, Amazon Route 53, right? We've published a 100% domain resolution SLA. So we are telling the customer that domain resolution will never fail with Amazon Route 53 if you've got your domains registered in Route 53. The consequence to that, the agreement to that is, if it does fail, do we give you a waiver for X percentage of your bill? Or you might even have businesses that say, you know what, we will give you an extended free trial for this particular service because such and such happened, right? Another example is, if you are using Amazon Shield, which is Shield Advanced, which is AWS's DDoS protection service, right? It has, if you're using the advanced feature, there are SLAs around, if we do not, if what part of DDoS attack are we able to detect, and based on that, you get a waiver of your bill, provided that your, systems under the hood are scaling, and there are a little bit of things attached to it. But then the SLA in that terms is is an agreement. So you're telling your customers, we agree to this, and your customers, it's like a mutual agreement onto it. And then finally, what is an error budget? You remember I said an SLO has a mathematical value to it. So 99.9% of the request should be under 200 milliseconds. What about the 0.1%? That is your error budget. Now, the error budget is not for the customer. The error budget is for you to be able to consume that time to failing faster, learning faster, and building better solutions to provide improved user experience, right? To innovate with technology. Because the first time you use it, there might be discrepancies, there might be I would say misunderstandings in how the systems is meant to operate versus what you understand it should be. There could be multiple reasons, right? There could be multiple reasons around, say, you have a hardened image in production. And then you end up using this technology that doesn't have a package that is supported on that image. Very simplistic things, but things could go wrong. That could deter you from achieving your SLO, but you give yourself a margin, and that's your error budget.
Yeah. And Pratima,
I'll
I think
pause
yeah,
there for any questions if there are.
yeah, Pratima, I think the thing over here is probably it'll be good to touch upon. A lot of my customers have asked, what do I do if I don't have an SLA? Like my business doesn't want to define an SLA because you're talking to a DevOps person, right? So some of
Correct.
these concepts are, dread metrics and stuff. So what do you do in that case? How do I start if I don't have an SLA that's guiding me?
Right.
How do I start? Any thoughts on that, or any way in which you think this could be approached?
So like in my previous role, I was responsible for building like an EKS compute platform or EKS platform for application developer teams to deploy their applications on, right? My interaction was not directly with the customer. My interaction with was with the internal teams. So what we aimed at doing was having you think about your customer doesn't have to be your end customer, right? Your customer can be an internal team as well. So it's about defining that contract between the two teams to understand, look, we can provide you capabilities across this much or across these indicators for this amount of time because we're innovating or we're doing some aspects, and you can expect certain builds to break because we are changing or we are upgrading, and that's within our error budget. So when they commit to the SLAs, or even if they don't have an SLA, they definitely have metrics to monitor their applications, right? Otherwise, how would they know something's gone wrong?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even if I don't sign an agreement with the customer, I still have to provide the like the experience to the customer, right? And then it builds into how much word of mouth and how much your customers like using your endpoints, and then that helps you grow and scale your business. Otherwise, sometimes it's reputational as well, right? Because if your business is not operating at the speed that the customers expect it to, or if your applications are not behaving the way they expect it to, then they will probably choose a different vendor that fits better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think somewhere, and I could be completely off here, somewhere I had read that when someone first goes on to a website, like you as a provider have about 3 seconds to make an impact. If you
Yes.
can't, they'll move
Yeah.
to the next provider. It's either 3 or 6 seconds. So that time that you can demonstrate that this is what they need is very small. And if
Yeah.
it's taking your website a lot longer to load, you kind of lost your customer there.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've heard the same as well. Are there any questions? Yeah, I guess
We do have
oh, you do.
there's
Yeah.
one question, May Pratima, if you give example, I think SLO and SLA is a very common terms that you see with like providers and application service provider. Maybe any examples around SLI from your perspective, or any use case that you could see that might be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, so that's a great segue into the next thing that I was going to talk about. These are called golden signals. So consider SLIs as indicators that feed into um, an objective, right? An objective may not necessarily be so, objective being, like I said, X% of customers should have the experience or the website loaded in 200 millisecond, right? That's the objective. I'm not defining what kind of signals I'm going to incorporate into it. Now, when you do the math, or if you look at any of the SRE blogs out there, they talk about a certain calculation, right? So when you look at the math, the indicator is for your internal consumption only, right? Because the indicator, the SLI, is going to drive the components that will feed into the objective. So I might say that that objective of us producing or the response time being under 200 milliseconds is driven by A, latency, and B, traffic. So what does your latency need to be, and what is the traffic measurement to drive that particular objective is your internal maths, right? It's your internal understanding of what those indicators are. So we start with these four golden signals, and over a period of time, we've kind of realized that if it's all about we even in security, it's about signal to noise ratio. If there are too many signals, you can get confused. If there is too much noise, you can also get confused. Too many signals can produce too much noise as well. So start simple with the golden signals. Latency, very essential to make sure that your customers load your websites or load your applications fast, right? Traffic, are you able to scale with demand? To scale with demand, you need to measure that demand. So do you have the right metrics in place to measure it? What is the rate of requests failing? How much can you accommodate? So requests might fail, it's all right, but is it well within your error budget? Or do you need to make changes, right? And usually these things come in play when you have a distributed development setup where different applications or different in a containerized or in EK or in a Kubernetes platform, different pods might be talking to different pods to get the right um, data to be able to serve a request. So what is the rate of errors if one component fails? Does everything else fail? Like how loosely coupled are your applications, right? So how do each other's error rates feed into your own error rate? And then finally, saturation. How busy is your service? Is it too busy? Do you need to scale out more? So it works really well with traffic as well. So start nimble, start with these four, and then think about, am I missing anything? Because if you've missed something, customer feedback will tell you, you know what, even if your application is loading within the time that you've said in 200 milliseconds, I see the page, but it's blank,
Yeah.
right? Which means there's either a caching problem or maybe something that you're not measuring probably well enough is feeding into that experience. So you're ticking off all of the indicators, you're ticking off all of the objectives, but you're not ticking off the agreement that you will have something to work with, right? So it works with building these two together from a business objective. Try to work backwards from a business objective or a technology objective, and see which signals you really need.
And Pratima, the audience is getting very eager to see a demo. So they
Mhm.
are, so I guess let's get into the demo mode as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. So the one thing that I'm going to showcase to you today, I think I need to set a little bit of a baseline before I get into it. So give me a minute. So some of the challenges that customers are facing today with containerized applications or monitoring them is to be able to build the right kind of dashboards. If you've got too many applications, then you'll have too many dashboards, right? What brings everything together? How do you connect two systems that talk to each other, producing a customer response? So those are one of the challenges. CloudWatch application signals is one of the components that I'm going to discuss more today and show you how it helps you resolve them out of the box, and then you can expand on it as well. The other one is, how do you define the golden metrics? Should you be doing the math to define what latency looks like, or are you provided with it? So with app signals, I'll show you how you can do the metrics as well, and then what is good and what is not that you can define in. And you can set your SLOs. So whatever indicators you might have, what objectives you want to achieve, you can set those SLOs with app signals, and you can then sort of work towards the root cause. So a lot of the things sort of come together to give you that service diagnostics. And these are the different screens. They might look really blurry right now, but these are the different screens that I'll be operating with. So without much ado, I'm going to move to my screen. This is one of my demo accounts. And because this is a demo account, there are engines that are feeding into this particular service to produce good and bad behavior, right? So this is the standard CloudWatch console. When you go into your AWS account, CloudWatch is our completely fully managed service to help you collect logs, metrics, and traces, and build on top of them, right? So application signals is one of the newer features. Um, it works seamlessly with EKS, which is the Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service. So if you've used EKS, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, EKS decouples the Kubernetes control plane with the compute platform. So your AWS completely manages the control plane and gives you the flexibility to manage the underlying compute, whether you want to use EC2 or Fargate. That's up to you. Fargate being serverless.
And maybe in the audience, they can let us know if they're using EKS or what compute have you used on AWS? Have you used serverless? Do you use EKS? Do let us know in the chat what kind of applications or compute you've used for your applications. We're curious to know, and if you've used EKS, we're keen to know as well.
Absolutely. What I can do is, I don't think I can monitor the comments, but keep them coming in, and Jyoti and May will tell me which ones are the ones that I can answer straight off the back. So if I'm looking on one side, it's because I'm looking at a screen that shows you a bigger picture. If I show you this on my laptop, it'll be very blurry. All right, so you can see I have a number of services. Now, these services are the services that I've deployed in an EKS cluster, right? So right off the back, as soon as I go into services, it has already captured all of the services. It has captured the application that is deployed, and it has also captured the namespaces or the Kubernetes constructs around it. Now, the obvious question is, if I deploy anything into EKS, will it just show up in CloudWatch? Not really, but there's not too much involved in doing it. So if you are using EKS, you can use an add-on called the Amazon CloudWatch Observability add-on. Using this add-on, make sure that it deploys all of the instrumentation, all of the necessary agents needed to ship all of that telemetry to CloudWatch. So you don't have to do any configuration, just click and it's done. So again, a fully managed feature that integrates two services together. Now, when I look at my, say, front end, say one of the services is the front end, I've got, it's telling me that there are 3 SLIs that are failing. I've got 6 set and 3 of them are failing. And then it's also giving me a little bit of, my service availability is looking at 83.8%, if that's one of the metrics that you're tracking as well. And it tells you what are the, where is it placed in your EKS or Kubernetes ecosystem. Now, if I go into that particular service, obviously, if there's something wrong, I want to know what's wrong, right? So I want to dive deeper into it. So I go into it and I see, well, I don't know what's happening here. Let me see. I've got some dependencies. I've set up canaries. Now, canaries is a way for you to test user behavior without publishing that user behavior to the customer, right? So if you've got a next to, a pre-production environment, or if there is a build that you want to deploy to production, but not have your customers check it, but yet capture that telemetry, canaries is your way to do it. And then it shows what are the HTTP faults that are in your environment. Now, if you look at it, now we're talking about golden signals here, right? It's telling me what type of latency am I seeing for this service and the dependencies. Now, I can filter it with 99 percentile or 90 percentile or 50 percentile, depending on what I want to observe. It takes a bit of time, and we can see the different services that are adding on to it. So all of these services together are producing that behavior that we're monitoring right now. So even if it says pet clinic front end, it is also tracking all of the dependencies. So oftentimes what happens is my service might not be broken or my team service might not be broken, but there is this other service that I need to contact because I need to get some information from that service. For example, maybe the information of how many times this particular patient has visited, or maybe I need to verify if this username and password is correct from an identity type of service, and it's getting bombarded because there's so many other services talking to it. So the service in question might not be at fault, but then there are dependencies that might be breaking or producing that lag.
Yeah. And Pratima, I think on the chat there, I think many of them have said that they use EC2 and they've used EC2, ECS, and EKS.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess just to kind of let them know that application signals, the similar experience can be, it is available for EC2 as well, applications on EC2 as well as ECS. So it's not just ECS. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So my example is Kubernetes, but yes, containerized platforms on AWS, you can use it. So now let's go down to what's really happening. So as soon as you deploy the add-on, it's able to track all of the routes that are being accessed. So for example, if you've got a test route that you've thrown in and no one's accessing it, you probably wouldn't see it here. But we can see there's a lot of posts and there's a lot of get requests that are happening. That's why they're the top request there. And then there's something failing. So registering an owner is one of the requests that's failing. So now immediately, like if you look at an incident response perspective, or from a fixing the error perspective, your mean time to respond is drastically reduced because you know exactly which um, route that you need to handle. So even within not just the service, but the exact methods that you would probably be looking at in your code, or what are the interactions that you should be looking at.
Yeah, and that's so
um,
right that it has identified all the services in your application, right? It's pretty cool that it has used the auto instrumentation to identify all the parts that are in your service, as opposed to you having to do something specifically for
Correct.
each. Yeah.
Correct. Usually, like if I didn't have this, I would probably be looking at different log sources, correlating them, figuring out, where is the lag happening, right? And another item is dependencies. So, like I said, right, my application might not be failing, but there are certain dependencies that are causing that problem. So now you can see that my application has two dependencies that I'm really tracking in terms of requests and availability. So one of them is the visits, and one of them is the visit service, and that's probably the one that is the outlier here. And it talks about the different routes as well. So what calls am I making to those services, or my service that I'm monitoring? What calls is it making to those services? So you can see to the different services, it's either making a post or a get, and then what the latency looks like. And I'm pretty sure like there's a problem here. And the immediate action we take is, hey, let's scale that out. Maybe it's not able to take the amount of load that it's getting, which is simple, right? Because now you're doing containers. You can set up the service to scale out. You can set very aggressive auto scaling policies to to see if that immediately responds by improving the latency. So see, like while we're doing this demo, in about 10 minutes, we've been able to go from there was something wrong in the service to figuring out which dependency is causing it, and then what corrective action we can take, which is a game changer. Because I used to I've worked as an incident responder as well, which means that for me to do this would probably be at least an hour of correlating multiple sources of logs, right? If I was going through native logs, if I didn't have this telemetry with me. um is there any question so far? I just want to check the chat.
No, it has been pretty good. We just chatting away about Canary's deployment and where the origin of a Canary deployment come from. And then I was quickly Googling. It's true. I was like, I know the story, but I don't know where it's the originally come from. So I quickly Google it and I just pasted in the link where the words of the Canary deployment come from, which
Oh,
I learned something new today. So it's very interesting. Thank you so much for asking the question. And I think Frank L81, you've been amazing answering the questions and having a conversation in the chat. I really appreciate it.
so it's funny, like, long time ago, not long time ago, even now, I'm not that old. We used to do like blue-green deployments, right?
Yeah,
Where we used to have multiple, platforms ready, and you do the blue deployment, and then you'd have,
yeah,
your DNS routes doing to the green deployment, which is where I remember very vaguely now, like some time ago, what we had done was, even with blue green, we used to phase the deployment. So we used to say, let's 10% of traffic go there, 20% of traffic
yes.
go, and that was to the live customers, right? So if anything went wrong with my new deployment, my live set of customers, even if it was 10%, would have that bad experience. And synthetic canaries is a good way to do that, except that your customers aren't impacted, right? So you build a synthetic canary. That means, when you define the kind of if you define that canary, CloudWatch will produce that customer not engagement, that customer experience, quite similar to what RUM does, right? Real user monitoring, where it simulates real user behavior and tells you how it would look like for a real user. Similarly, with synthetic canaries, it basically reviews the whole deployment, and it'll tell you if this deployment is, or this particular canary that you've set up is responding as you would expect it to. without exposing it to your customers. So, two slightly different constructs. One is user behavior monitoring, one is overall behavior monitoring. But it also feeds into whether this build is ready to deploy or not. So, you might have written the code perfectly up to scratch, but it's probably not delivering what you were expected to deliver when you look at those SLOs.
That's a great answer. I know we've got 15 minutes into our streaming. We do have another question. So either Pratima or Jyoti, if you can answer, is that service dependency mapping happening at discovery time, or is it more dynamic?
Is the service dependency mapping happening at discovery time, or is it more dynamic? It is, once you've added the add-on, it continually sends telemetry back. So if you add new services, that service map continues to update. So let me go back to the service map, tell you how it looks like. And as you add SLOs as well, that service map continues to grow. So you don't have, it's not just at deployment time, the agent stays as an add-on, right? So it's not a let me capture this point in time thing. It'll continue to grow if I continue to deploy.
And just on that, as Pratima said, when the agent is deployed via the add-on, it is a daemon set. It's running as a daemon set on EKS, and then it injects the Open Telemetry SDK auto instrumentation, which discovers the services and also discovers the calls between the services. So that's how it builds this out, and it's sending that back. So it uses that auto instrumentation at the SDK level to do that.
Absolutely. And then you can see with because my edges are the services, and whether I have a canary associated with it or not, you can see with the service, it gives you an overview of, what the behavior is as well. So you could possibly, instead of going to the services because it's too wordy and you're more a visual person just like me, you could go to the map, click on the items and get like a gist of what's happening to my service. At the top level, it's got your golden signals in place, it's got your SLOs that are failing, and then how is your system operating. And now if I click on the SLO, it'll take me straight to the SLO page. So it pivots back to what I was looking at before. I just read Frank L81's comment on canaries being historically used. Yes, that is true. That is true. Thanks.
Cool, awesome.
All right.
So we have got 10 more minutes.
Mhm.
Pratima, anything else you want to share on the SLO, SLA, and golden signals?
So I think it goes back to the top level question of, how does security and observability come together?
Yes.
What you should also think about is, yes, you've got all of your containerized application packaged up, deployed into your clusters, and you've got all of this telemetry being monitored. What if there were threat vectors in your environment? Or what if, as a developer, I went into a production pod, exec into a container, and ran a code, right? My SLOs or SLIs may not be impacted, but I could be talking to this crypto mining operation happening outside of my gateway and still trying to run some code without, if I'm very diligent, without anything happening to my committed agreements with my with the consumers of my application, which is where you should think of something like a runtime monitoring as well. So yes, this is runtime monitoring, but this is runtime monitoring based on behaviors. You can do security runtime monitoring as well. If you look at the threat detection service that we have, which is called Amazon Guard Duty. Lately, our CISO, Chris Betts, has written a few blogs around the different engines that power Guard Duty and our AWS security services at scale. So, there's literally a network telemetry monitoring engine sitting at the edge between AWS and the internet and continually monitoring. Imagine the scale of that, continually monitoring and feeding back to the threats that are on the internet today that we've detected, and you get that experience. So if you use Guard Duty's runtime monitoring feature, it will help you get indicators of compromise in your environment, to understand threats in your environment. So there might be, you might be seeing a particular service which probably isn't customer facing, but it's doing a lot of traffic being one of our golden signals. But it's not getting customer traffic. So where is that traffic coming from? Maybe some malware was installed, and then that's talking to the internet and getting some data in, right? So those are the things that you may not necessarily be able to look at it from the observability perspective, but security telemetry feeds that into it as well. So it's very useful. Sorry, go ahead.
That's a very interesting point you made, Pratima, because we do have the observability game day, and in the
Mhm.
observability game day, it's a level 400 game day, so it touches a lot of services, not just observability related. And there's one there where it expects you to do log insights, get a log insights query going
Mhm.
for API gateway call, and if you complete that, the next step is that you have to enable WAF rules on that CloudFront distribution. And
Yeah.
once you turn on the WAF rules, it starts blocking all the traffic. So your log insights query stops working. And so really,
Mhm.
being able to, as you just put it, right, being able to tell where it's coming from and tying
Yeah.
security in and how it can impact is so crucial.
Yeah, that visibility is useful not only for the good behavior of your application, like what good for your customer looks like, but it's also for your what good security looks like in your environment as well, right?
Yeah.
Because if you had indicators of compromise in your environment at some point, without you even noticing, they might be able to infiltrate your environment or establish persistence, and
Yeah.
that's where things get a little bit messier.
Yeah.
There's a question, isn't there?
There's a
Um,
question, yeah. To Can you ask Pratima to show us ECS and EC? I assume it's
I think they mean
EKS,
EKS.
EKS container topology view, so that we can see what components they are. Trying to get the idea of the observability aspect. I don't know if Pratima, if you have a view of the topology view of that.
You mean to say for the particular cluster, or is it from a service map point of view?
Yeah, I think
Because,
let's do it from a service med perspective
right.
because you walked through a service med area.
Yeah, like look, true to
Or
any
the
demo account, I don't have access to do much more than what I'm expected to. So least privilege, always remember one of the more important security practices. So I don't have access to the Kubernetes API in this demo account because I'm not meant to. But if you do go to EKS, it gives you a list of all of the workloads that are deployed in the cluster,
mm,
including like the namespaces and APIs and any configurations that you might have set for that cluster. So if you've got more access than me in your environment, you'll be able to see it. But if you just go back to the service map as well, let me pull it back. You can see that one of my applications, which is the Pet Clinic front end, has the Pet Clinic client, which is a RUM client, which is generating that RUM telemetry. It has about
mm,
6 canaries set up, and it is also integrated with the wet service, the uh, wet service, which is Java based, and it is also hooked into like the visit service. So it does show you that entire map for a particular service that it has detected and where all is it interacting. So one service could be interacting with another service, right? So it will show you that. But this is from the perspective of the calls that are going from that service. So underlying network or underlying through IAM, they might be connected, but unless the service is making a particular sort of call through a get or a post kind of request, you probably wouldn't see it here though.
nice. That is amazing. Um, I think we are getting close to the end of our show. Um, Pratima and Jyoti, any last words before we end the show?
I want
Um, famous last words. Sorry, Jyoti, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there was a comment from Gagan Singh that he was happy and sad that he learned something, but he also does not know this stuff. So I just wanted to say that you have to just be curious. None of us know everything. We are
Yeah.
also learning every day. Um, uh, yeah, I think things are changing quite rapidly. Leverage generative AI as much as you can, and shortcut some of that learning.
Yeah.
But just stay curious. I think the key thing is to stay curious.
Yeah, and look, wherever you are, you might, the two big things that even when I was an AWS customer, I used to look out for was reinvent and reinforce, right? The two big events, and after those events would come, bombardment of these announcements, and then you pick and choose. So you prioritize the announcements that fit with what you are doing today and how they will enhance your current operations, and then you look at the extra bit. So like me, right, I've been I've been an AWS customer before joining AWS for almost more than a decade, before I decided to join AWS and realize I have no idea. Like, I have so much to learn, which is why I moved to that security specialty, because I felt that's one place where I really need to build my depth, because I've been working in security for such a long time. I wanted to hone that. And now I realize that, this getting the right telemetry in the right place is so essential for even, building a good security posture as well, which is why I'm starting to dabble with observability and trying to learn a bit more. When I had used CloudWatch 5 or 6 years ago, or even before that, all I remember was CloudWatch alarms to trigger auto scaling, dashboards, thresholds, and that's it. And now I look at CloudWatch, it is just such an amazing ecosystem of different features that I don't need to look at logs anymore. Like, I get so much out of the box through the engineering done behind the scenes that I don't need to go back to the rudimentary sort of use cases of I need to query 10 different sources of logs to build my indicators. I get them straight out of the box. So continue looking at what's changing, and where it's going to be the biggest impact to what you're doing today, and then start from there.
Yeah, amazing. No, thank you so much. Thank you, Jyoti, for hosting today's show, and Pratima being an awesome, awesome speaker. And I just want to say thank you to all the audience who is tuning in for today's observability topic. And we will be back bi-weekly at the same time, the same place. You know who we are. Find us on LinkedIn if you want to know what's the next topic, but it will be something related to observability, and we'll be back for the next week. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, May. You were
Thanks,
awesome.
everyone. Thanks,
Bye.
Jyoti. Thanks, May.